Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a brand new Paldea Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, PAWMOT. PAWMOT is the final evolution of Palmy, which can be found in the wild, and to evolve it, you're going to need a lot of candy and to walk 25 kilometers with it as your buddy. So after a lot of walking yesterday and today, I finally have it evolved. It's an electric and fighting type Pokemon with the moveset of Spark, Discharge, and Close Combat. It's very glassy, but it hits very hard. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and test out PAWMOT in the Open Ultra League. Hopping to the first match, and we've got the Battle of Ghost types, Giratina Origin versus Jellicent. I'm going to be staying in this matchup as I will be able to outpace by a single turn. I farm up to the Shadow Ball and I decide to go for an Ominous Wind bait here. Ominous Wind gets no shielded as my opponent reads me like a book. That's very unfortunate. I'm going to be shielding here. Opponent is going to full send the Shadow Ball. I can now throw 4 Shadow Claws and go for the Ominous Wind. This will be lethal. Opponent has to shield if they want to keep this energy, and they do, so I farm up, switch into the Tapu Fini, and catch the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is a lot less threatening into Tapu Fini than it is into the Giratina Origin. My opponent is now going to send in Registeel. I'm farming up with the Tapu Fini, going for the Surf, and it looks like that was a CMP tie with the Registeel. Surf into the Registeel will be no shielded, and it is the CMP tie. I'm just going to let this go. This is a very negative matchup for the Tapu Fini, and now it's time for the newest Glass Cannon in the Ultra League. In comes PAWMOT. PAWMOT farming up. Unfortunately, Registeel's residual energy does allow it to outpace here. I'm going to shield up the Focus Blast, overfarm all the way up to back-to-back close combats, and fire off close combat number 1 here. Opponent is going to let that go. They still have the very low health Jellicent in the back. It's a Shadow Charizard. It's a simultaneous switch. I send in Giratina, they send in Jellicent. Charizard firing off the Dragon Claw here, but I have way too much energy on PAWMOT. In comes PAWMOT. PAWMOT not quite at the back-to-back discharges, but this game is done. First discharge gets the shield, and second discharge will be massive overkill into the Shadow Charizard as PAWMOT secures the win. There's trouble in the next match as I lead into a pretty big core breaker, Giratina Origin into Clefable. This team is ABA weak to Fairy, and I'm met with a Fairy type, so this is really not ideal. I'm farming up with the Giratina and firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will hit for a lot of damage here. Opponent is going to let that through. And the nice thing is now the Clefable is potentially in a range where I can start to threaten it with Fast Move Pressure and Ominous Winds. So I will commit the shield. I'm farming up with the Giratina, and I'm firing off the Ominous Wind on the CMP tie. Ominous Wind into Clefable will be shielded. I do want to save a shield for PAWMOT. It's a glass cannon, so it's very frail. So I'm going to look to Spark down. In comes PAWMOT. Opponent going to send in a Shadow Poliwrath, and it looks like their backline is extremely weak to PAWMOT. I'm going to fire off the Discharge. They're 1 away from a Dynamic Punch or a Scald, and both are resisted on Tapu Fini. So I'm going to switch into Tapu Fini and catch the Scald. Unfortunately, they do get the debuff from the Scald. They will be able to outpace and make it to Scald number 2. Again, I can let this go. So I'm in a pretty okay spot here. Scald again is going to debuff me. Double debuffed. I didn't want to risk a Surf not KOing, so I decided to full send the Moonblast here. Moonblast will guarantee the KO. In the back, opponent has Shadow Magnezone, and this is going to be interesting. PAWMOT farming up. PAWMOT able to make it to the close combat. This is going to be one-shotting the Shadow Magnezone, but now my defense is debuffed. It's a race. Spark versus Fairy Wind, and PAWMOT with a fraction of HP takes the win. Bit of a tricky lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Charizard. This Charizard is wasting no time going for the Dragon Claw as soon as it gets it. Dragon Claw will connect. They're going to save switch into Dubwool. I'm going to farm up a bunch of energy on the Giratina and send in the Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini, of course, is going to be resisting these double kicks. They're going to have to go for a ton of body slams if they want to get through the Tapu Fini. Now, this is my newly built Tapu Fini as of a couple weeks ago. Previously, I had a Raid IV one, and when I was in GoFest New York City, I was able to get this very, very high rank Ultra League traded Tapu Fini, which has been so much fun to run. There, I tried to throw 2 water guns in the move. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a stutter, so unfortunately, it ends up being on alignment, which is really not ideal. But anyways, super happy about the new Tapu Fini. I believe it has 7 more HP than my old Tapu Fini, so it puts in a nice amount of work. Here, I'm anticipating they blind payback, so I'm just going to send in PAWMOT. PAWMOT is an electric and fighting type Pokemon, so it is going to be resisting the payback. They're now firing off the body slam. I'm going to shield this up and look to Spark down. I think I can spark down here. Opponent is going to send in the Charizard. Charizard going for the Dragon Claw, but guess who wins CMP? That's right, it's not Charizard. Palmot wins the CMP tie, gets the KO with the discharge. What does the opponent have in the back? Opponent sends in double. They've got to be weak. Palmot gets the farm down in the back. It's Heliolisk. And this is going to be interesting. Helio is going to fire off the Breaking Swipe. I think I need to bait here with the discharge and land the close combat. I can't afford to lower my defense as a Volt Switch might KO. So I go for the discharge bait. I get the shield. Palmot with a fraction of HP makes the close combat. Hello Heliolisk. Goodbye Heliolisk. And that's a good game. We've got another core breaker on the lead in the next match. Giratina Origin into Ampharos. Ampharos, of course, does have access to Brutal Swing. I'm farming up with the Giratina, going for the switch into Palmot to catch the Brutal Swing where it is going to be resisted. Brutal Swing not going to do a lot of damage there. They're going to rebank a Brutal Swing, and now they're going to send in Virizion. Definitely good to bait out the Virizion, as Virizion, of course, with Leaf Blade destroys Tapu Fini. I go for the close combat. That does a massive amount of damage. Opponent is going to be forced to fire off the Leaf Blade to get the KO. They end up going for the Sacred Sword. Either way, it's going to get the KO, but in those neutral type situations, Leaf Blade does do slightly more damage. They're going to go for the Leaf Blade into the Giratina. I'm going to go for an undercharge on the Ominous Wind here. My goal is to leave it in 2 Shadow Claw farm down range, and I'm able to do exactly that. So now I can exit this matchup with a Shadow Ball loaded, and still with a decent amount of health. In comes the Ampharos. I'm firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball into the Ampharos will get the shield. I'm farming up with Giratina, and I get a second catch, catching the Brutal Swing onto Tapu Fini. Ampharos is a big core breaker, but I'm doing what I can to try and fight back in this game. They're farming up a ton of energy in the back. They have Cresselia, and I'm basically just triple countered here. This is going to be extremely tough. They banked a ton of energy on the Ampharos. I fire off the Moonblast. Moonblast does some solid damage, but not enough to threaten the Cresselia. Cresselia fires out the Future Sight. That does massive damage. I'm able to make the last second surf. Is the switch clock up? I would love to be able to save the Tapu Fini, but I just cannot, and I get farmed down. In comes the Giratina. I think I potentially see a win con here. If I can fully commit to the farm down and get the farm down, I should be able to win the game, but as you're going to see, I fall agonizingly short. I'm forced to go for the Ominous Wind on the CMP tie here to deny their energy, but the Ampharos has way too much energy. My only hope is that I live a Brutal Swing, which as you're going to see, my Giratina definitely does not. We see a great lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Registeel. Incredibly happy to see this here, as my Tapu Fini in the back really does not appreciate Reggie. I'm going to look to overfarm by 1 and potentially play to a CMP tie if my opponent throws the Zap Cannon as soon as they get it. Shadow Ball will be shielded, and it is the CMP tie. I'm going to let this go. I can pretty comfortably tank 2 Zap Cannons. Zap Cannon connects and does get the attack drop. That's a bit unfortunate. Again, I'm going to throw 8 Shadow Claws, so if they throw right away, again, it is going to be the CMP tie. Ideally, you do want to try and throw before they can get an extra debuff with their second Zap Cannon. They're going for another Zap Cannon here. Do we get a second debuff? We do not. Okay, that's kind of nice. I'm farming up with the Giratina, going for the Shadow Ball, but I was too predictable. My opponent figured out when I like to throw, and they make a nice catch onto Walrein. I could have sent in Palmot here, but I have a feeling that Palmot will be useful in the back. So instead, I'm going to send in Tapu Fini. And look at the bulk on this new Tapu Fini, by the way. Earthquake doesn't even do half. Able to tank that, no problem. And now I'm going to fire off the Moonblast. Moonblast into the Walrein, gets the Walrein to 1 HP, and the Water Gun gets the KO. Opponent can send back in the Registeel here. Registeel does have a charge move loaded. In comes the Reggie. They throw a couple lock-ons, and they're going to get the KO. And I'm just going to send in Palmot. I have the shield advantage and look to spark down. In the back, they have Talonflame. Their core broken by Palmot, and the opponent concedes the match. We move into the next match, and we see the exact same leads, Giratina Origin into Registeel. Same game plan as before. I'm going to look to overfarm 1 past the Shadow Ball and go for it. My opponent, this time, doesn't actually go for the CMP tie. So they just go for the extra lock-on. They throw 1 lock-on afterwards, and now they're going to be firing off the Zap Cannon. Zap Cannon connects into the Giratina, and I do get debuffed. That's a bit unfortunate. I'm farming up with the Giratina. My opponent is able to make it to another Zap Cannon. I overfarmed a bit too much there. I should have thrown first, but thankfully, they do not get the debuff. So a bit of a misplay there by me, but thankfully, I get a bit lucky, and they don't get a second debuff. I'm farming up with the Giratina. Giratina going for the Shadow Ball. This will not KO, but it will get the Registeel very low. Registeel, able to hang on. Registeel will fire off the charge move. And from here, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to get an energy lead on the PAWMOT. Again, PAWMOT's a glass cannon, so it's definitely going to need energy advantage here. And whatever they had in back apparently did not want to see PAWMOT, as they just quit. We see a Nightmare lead in the next match. Giratina Origin into Shadow Snorlax. You've got to be kidding me. I'm going to safe switch into Tapu Fini. My opponent responds with a Charm Primarina. So at this point, I'm expecting they're running Snorlax Double Charm. In which case, hopefully if I can get shields down, I'll be in a somewhat okay position. I bait with the Surf. I'm able to grab a shield. People love to shield their Charmers. And now I'm going to be shielding up the Tapu Fini and going for the Moonblast. Moonblast should guarantee switch advantage or the final shield. And honestly, either one should be okay for me here. So I am going to be firing off the Moonblast. I get the final shield, and my opponent will get the Charm down. And now I just need to use the Giratina to get rid of the Primarina, and I should be hopefully in an okay spot to sweep with PAWMOT. But here, I underestimate the amount of damage Disarming Voice does. That does so much damage, I can't make the move. I'm forced to send in PAWMOT, everything going wrong. In the back is Shadow Kingdra, and I just don't have enough HP to KO the Kingdra and to KO the Snorlax. Like, I could close combat there, but then I just get farmed down by the Lax. So I discharge, and I resign the match. We see a tricky lead in the next match. Giratina Origin into Shiny Shadow Charizard. I'm farming up. I'm going for the catch, and I do not get it. My opponent is going to be sending in Shadow Ampharos. Ampharos, not a comfortable matchup for Fini whatsoever. Surf will connect though, and Surf does quite a lot of damage. I'm just going to let this go. My opponent is actually running Brutal Swing, and it looks like they might be running Focus Blast as well, based on the fact that they threw a resisted move into the Fairy type. So I'm going to fire off the Surf. I get the shield. My opponent, I know they have Brutal Swing. I just have to hope that they go for the blind Brutal Swing. So I send in PAWMOT here, and they threw right away. Is it the Brutal Swing? It's the Focus Blast. I get one shot. You've got to be kidding me. And in the back, they have Swampert, and I already know with the amount of energy that the Charizard has, I can't win this game. I go for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball connects. In comes that Shadow Shiny Charizard. I can tank a Dragon Claw, but I'm just going to run out of HP here. I go for the Shadow Ball, but my opponent has a very clear path to victory whether they shield or not. They shield the Shadow Ball, and I resign the match. Hopping into the final match, we see a great lead, Giratina Origin into Toxicroak. My opponent is going to immediately save switch into Tapu Fini, and seeing Giratina Origin versus Tapu Fini, I'm getting a bit of a reminder of Ultra Fantasy Cup. I'm firing off the Shadow Ball. Tapu Fini is going to let this go. I throw one more Shadow Claw, switch into my own Tapu to catch the charge move. Whether it's a Surf or a Moonblast, fine by me. Opponent was going for the Surf bait, but that's fine. I can tank a Surf and the Moonblast after, farm down, and leave with a bunch of energy. So Moonblast is going to connect. My opponent is going to get farmed down. In comes the Toxicroak. I'm farming up with the Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini is firing off the Surf. Now Surf is thrown in the middle of their counter, and that matters because with a fraction of HP, I'm able to make it to a second Surf. That barely does not KO. In the back, oh no, it's Heliolisk. Heliolisk absolutely destroys Giratina Origin. It has the normal subtyping, so everything I throw is double resisted. And this is looking like a loss as well, I'll be honest. This is really tough. I'm building up, I'm baiting with the discharge here. Opponent is going to shield, which is good, but I'm still in a very difficult situation. I'm shielding up Breaking Swipe, but Heliolisk has a massive pacing advantage here. They're firing off yet another Breaking Swipe, and oh my goodness, this is going to be very tough. I'm farming up, and I decide to not bait. I think I need to hope that my opponent tries to call the bait here. Close combat is shielded. I'm going to defer the Volt Switch onto the Giratina, and Giratina will be hit by this super effective Breaking Swipe. Breaking Swipe connects. I'm farming up with the Giratina, but watch, this is going to do absolutely nothing. It's double resisted and debuffed. That does nothing to the Helio. Helio farming up, and they're firing off the charge move here. And the Toxicroak, I believe, has a move, or it's very close to one. In comes the PAWMOT. Toxicroak switches in, gets the spark to KO, and my opponent will end up losing as PAWMOT gets the KO with the close combat. And now some final thoughts on PAWMOT and its future viability in the Open Ultra League. This Pokemon is the definition of a glass cannon. It's going to hit very hard, but that comes with a price, and that price is it's extremely glassy. If you're up energy with it, or if you have a shield advantage, it can put in a lot of work, but in those neutral matchups is where it's going to struggle quite a bit. Like a neutral matchup with energy and shield parity, it's not going to have a particularly good time. You can also run Wild Charge instead of Discharge, but to me, having both charge moves that lower your defense really turns it into kind of a gimmicky and really volatile mon, whereas with Discharge, at the very least, you have a way to consistently apply damage. But either way, I don't think it's a mon that's going to see a lot of play in the Open Ultra League. It can have games where it can kind of take over if you get it into one of those favorable positions, but a lot of the time, it's going to feel like a bit of a liability. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.